The tragedy was not the death. It was what came after. We are conditioned to believe that survival is a blessing. To survive a war, a crash, a disease, or a moment of great loss is supposed to be a victory. Survival is framed as fortune, as grace, as proof that life still wants us. But for Prince Rainier III of Monaco, survival was not a gift. It was a sentence. On September 14, 1982, Princess Grace died. The woman who had been his partner, his anchor, his emotional center for 26 years, was gone. And Rainier remained, not for days, not for months, but for 23 long years. Longer than many marriages last in their entirety, longer than some entire lives. He continued to rule. He continued to sign documents, attend ceremonies, build towers, expand land, and protect the sovereignty of his tiny state. But those who watched closely could see the truth. He was no longer living forward. He was living in suspension, marking time, waiting. Rainier III was Europe's longest reigning monarch. He was known as the Builder Prince, the man who transformed a fading casino town into one of the wealthiest countries on earth. But inside the palace, surrounded by memories of a fairy tale that ended abruptly on a mountain road, he was a man serving a quiet, lonely penance. This is not the story of a prince's glory. It is the story of the 8,241 days Prince Rainier spent waiting to die. To understand why his final solitude was so devastating, we must first understand the loneliness from which he came. Rainier Louis-Henri Maxence Bertrand Grimaldi was born in 1923 into a royal household that was already fractured. His parents' marriage was deeply unhappy. Conflict defined it. Distance followed it. And when they divorced, Rainier became the silent casualty of a union that never truly existed. He was sent away young, dispatched to boarding schools in England, far from the Mediterranean warmth of Monaco, far from any sense of belonging. There, his title did not protect him. It isolated him. Other boys mocked him. They called him Fat Little Monaco. He learned early that a crown could separate more than it shielded. Loneliness became familiar. So did discipline. Rainier learned to rely on structure rather than affection. During the Second World War, he served with the French army. Not ceremonially, but actively. He earned the Croix de Guerre, the Bronze Star. These were not honors given for lineage, but for endurance under pressure, for holding one's ground when things fall apart. When Rainier ascended the throne in 1949 at the age of 26, he inherited a principality in decline. Monaco's treasury was nearly empty. The casino, once the jewel of European glamour, had lost its shine. Worse still, the future of the Grimaldi dynasty itself was uncertain. Without an heir, Monaco risked absorption by France. The young prince was surrounded by threats. Aristotle Onassis, the Greek shipping magnate, owned a controlling stake in Monaco's main economic engine. To Onassis, Monaco was a playground. To Rainier, it was a country worth saving. The two men clashed in a quiet war for control, one driven by profit, the other by duty. Rainier fought fiercely, but he fought alone. He longed for companionship. For 6 years, he loved the French actress Gisèle Pascal. It was not a scandalous affair. It was a genuine relationship. But survival politics intervened. Rumors were spread, allegedly by Rainier's own sister, claiming Pascal was infertile. In a monarchy where succession meant everything, doubt was enough. Rainier ended the relationship, not because he stopped loving her, but because duty demanded sacrifice. He chose the crown over happiness. Once again, he stood alone. Then, in 1955, During the Cannes Film Festival, a meeting took place that would change the trajectory of his life. It was meant to be nothing more than a polite photo opportunity. Grace Kelly, the American actress, arrived first. Rainier was late. She was irritated. Neither expected anything more. But as they walked through the palace gardens, something unexpected occurred. This was not love at first sight. It was recognition. Two people, each trapped by expectation, each searching for an escape. Rainier needed glamour, legitimacy, and an heir to secure his nation. Grace wanted freedom from the suffocating demands of Hollywood. It was, at first, a rational appraisal. But reason slowly gave way to affection. And affection deepened into partnership. On April 19, 1956, Rainier and Grace married in Monaco's cathedral. The world called it the wedding of the century. Cameras flashed, crowds cheered. A fairy tale was born. For Rainier, something far more important happened. His isolation ended. For the first time in his life, he had a teammate. They worked as a unit. Rainier later said this himself, without embellishment. Grace became the face of Monaco, its elegance, its warmth, its global appeal. Rainier became the architect, the planner, the builder. Together, they transformed the principality. Land was reclaimed from the sea, expanding Monaco's territory by 20%. Skyscrapers rose, infrastructure modernized. An underground railway was built. The industrial district of Fontvieille emerged. Revenue skyrocketed. Monaco joined the United Nations. When France attempted to exert pressure, the couple stood firm and preserved independence. But the true transformation happened behind palace walls. They built a family. Caroline was born in 1957, Albert in 1958, Stephanie in 1965. The lonely boy from the boarding school now lived in a noisy household filled with laughter, arguments, chaos, and love. They were not perfect. Grace missed her acting career deeply. When she turned down a role in Alfred Hitchcock's Marnie due to public disapproval, she fell into depression. Rainier could be demanding and short-tempered, but they were bound by something stronger than perfection. They were united by shared purpose. By the early 1980s, they believed the hardest years were behind them. They spoke of slowing down, of growing old together, of watching their children build lives of their own. They had survived the pressure of monarchy. They believed they had earned peace. Then came September 13, 1982. Princess Grace was driving back to the palace from their country home at Roque-Aguel. Her youngest daughter, Stephanie, sat beside her. The road was familiar. Ironically, it was the same stretch immortalized in Grace's film To Catch a Thief. But this was no movie. As they approached a hairpin turn, Grace panicked. She said she could not stop the car. The brakes were not responding. In seconds, control was lost. The car plunged off the road, tumbling down the mountainside, crashing through trees before landing far below. Rainier was at the palace when the call came. He rushed to the hospital. At first, the news sounded hopeful. Broken bones, injuries but survivable. He allowed himself to believe they had escaped again. They had not. Doctors soon discovered that Grace had suffered a minor stroke while driving. The crash caused a second, massive brain hemorrhage. She was brain dead. The woman Rainier loved was gone. Machines were keeping her body alive. Rainier faced an impossible decision. As sovereign and as husband, he authorized the removal of life support. At 10:55 p.m. on September 14, 1982, Princess Grace died. The team was split apart. At her funeral, the world gathered. Celebrities, royalty, heads of state. But the cameras returned again and again to one man. Rainier sat in the front pew, clutching a handkerchief, his composure collapsing when the choir sang Barber's Adagio for strings. She was buried in the family crypt, and beside her tomb, an empty slab of marble remained, unmarked, waiting. Rainier saw it, and he understood. His life had become a waiting room. Most people grieve and then, slowly, move forward. Rainier did not. He returned to work with relentless intensity. He signed thousands of ordinances. He micromanaged every detail of the state. If he kept busy, perhaps the silence would not catch him. He smoked heavily, up to 60 cigarettes a day. A slow erosion. Friends encouraged him to remarry. He refused. "It would be very hard to replace her," he said. And he meant it. Without Grace's calming presence, the family began to fracture. Stephanie struggled deeply, burdened by survivor's guilt and cruel rumors that blamed her for the crash. Caroline later lost her own husband in a tragic boating accident. Albert remained unmarried well into middle age. Rainier worried constantly about succession. In 2002, fearing the dynasty would end, he changed the constitution to allow the crown to pass to his daughter's children if Albert died without heirs. Even his laws were shaped by anxiety. He filled Monaco with Grace's name. Hospitals, libraries, gardens, memorials. He lived inside a shrine of memory, a museum of loss. Years passed. His health declined. Surgeries, infections, heart problems. He spent long stretches in the hospital, looking out at the city he built, a city that felt increasingly empty. In January 2005, he made his final public appearance at the International Circus Festival he had founded. The crowd rose in applause, not just for the monarch, but for the man who had endured. In March 2005, his body began to fail completely. Heart failure, kidney failure, lung infection. He was placed on a ventilator. His children kept vigil. On April 6, 2005, at 6:35 in the morning, Prince Rainier III died. He was 81 years old. His funeral mirrored Grace's. The same cathedral, the same music, the same heavy silence. And once again, Barber's Adagio for strings filled the space. In the crypt, the empty slab beside Grace was finally sealed. The name Rainier III was engraved. After 23 years, the wait was over. The team was together again. Rainier III saved his country. He modernized its economy. He secured its sovereignty. But his greatest act of endurance was not political. It was emotional. It was waking up day after day for 8,241 days in a world that no longer contained the person who made it worth living. Survival is often called a gift. But for the Prince of Monaco, death was not a tragedy. It was a release. It was the end of exile.